Hello, everyone, and welcome again to another episode of Hit and Hustle live show on the Irish Sports Daily YouTube channel. I am Greg Flammang. With me here is Jamie Uyeyama, the Yama Jamie University. The original plan was to just talk about just the second half of our conversation last week, which was a stock report on the defense. We did the offense last week, and that's what we were going to do today. And there was, I guess, a little bit of news. About the Notre Dame scheduling a HBCU Jackson State. First time they've ever scheduled an FCS opponent. I encourage everyone to go to irishsportsdaily.com and look at Jamie's 6 thoughts on a Thursday. He wrote about that, his views on that, and I thought it was really good. And just kind of a lot of the things that people didn't like about it, Jamie kind of knock those out, and there were that included some things that I kind of had a problem. I don't want to say a problem with, but that I was worried about, and Jamie kind of alleviated those concerns, for lack of a better way to put it. And then Brian Kelly decided that he wanted to talk to a couple of outlets, right? And he has a way, since he's left, he has a way of every time he speaks of saying things that just kind of, you probably shouldn't say those things, my man. And he went along and did that. So, Jamie, let's get your reaction to, I guess, Brian Kelly's comments about, why he left and that sort of thing.
Well, I think I'm not that Notre Dame fans are not used to this at all, but for a guy who was kind of known before, like as he was taking the Notre Dame job, for being like supposedly being like a politician and knowing how to like kind of present like things in a PR type of way, he's really bad at it. He's like very bad at it.
It's so bad.
Yeah. And I mean, you can go all the way back to, that very first season when, he talked about, I can't remember exactly how it was said, but it was basically like, these guys are Weiss's guys. They're not my guys.
It was 2011.
Yeah. So, yeah. Well, I can't remember. Was that the 2011
It was
year?
2011 because it was after the USC game.
Yeah.
It was the big thing, and it was right before Navy, I remember.
And just a super dumb thing to say to get your team like kind of alienated. And if people didn't like you before, they definitely didn't like you then, on the team. And I'm not even talking about people, just fans or whatever.
Right.
And maybe he didn't care, and obviously the next year they went undefeated in the regular season and all that. And, they got along good enough to do that. But he's obviously said some things and kind of let loose a couple times. And the stuff that he said, so he did an article, for those that didn't read it, he did an interview with Dennis Dodd from CBS Sports, and also did, I believe he did one with Ralph Russo from the AP. Yeah. And basically there wasn't too much that was different than in either piece. He said the same kind of thing. So basically it was like, well, why did you leave Notre Dame? And his thing and it wasn't surprising that because this is kind of stuff that people had probably heard about, or there were definitely whispers about it. This was a thing, like, him with the facilities getting upgraded, like, wanting the Goog to be like upgraded, the private chef thing. But it's just the way that he did it, the way that he presented the private chef thing, and then the whole like everything, it just came off like he's just an a-hole. And he that's the way it came off. He was a total a-hole. And I think, a lot of people kind of thought that before. And I obviously we're friends with a lot of Notre Dame fans. And I think a lot of people felt the same way when he left. Is like, even the people who liked him were like, but he's our a-hole, right? Yeah. Like he's you know, he's your guy. So, and then you kind of realize, oh, how everyone embraced Marcus Freeman. Man, everybody really hated Brian Kelly, like nationally, like,
Yeah.
and that has played into kind of part of the thing of why people already who had dislike for Notre Dame, it took it a step further.
Yeah.
And I think just with this interview, it just was he just said a lot of things like it did come off like he was just making excuses for why things didn't go well and like how it wasn't going to go well. And it completely ignored some of the obvious stuff that he didn't do well. Like try hard in recruiting.
I mean, his own culpability,
Yeah.
just a complete, like, we couldn't get the training table set up or like the Goog, and look, like you've talked about before, like those are real issues. It's not like it isn't.
Yeah, for sure. There are issues.
No,
I'm not saying that they're not issues.
Yeah.
But the way that he had presented it in that, and whatever, he's talking about it, and who knows, maybe he's going to come out and say it's out of context later on. But the way he presented it in a way was, it just came off very pompous and basically like now he's got everything he needs to win a national championship. Yeah. And almost like, like he was doing it all behind with that, like one hand behind his back, basically. And I'm like, just come on. Like, and that'd be one thing. And I'm not saying that those aren't, like you said, you want to have all those advantages and be matched up with people. But yeah, the way he kind of just said it, and he said something about basically like guys who really care about football or something. And it was just like,
guys who are committed to winning.
Yes. Like it was just,
like, guys want to be great or something. It was just,
give me a break when the whole thing you're talking about is culture and the the grittiness of these players, and it's just a slap in the face to all those guys who played for him at Notre Dame, really, right? Like, and and maybe he's like didn't mean it in that way. It doesn't matter. That's how it came off. Just like how like these aren't my guys. Like it doesn't matter. That's how it came off, and it's just a bad look all around. Like, I don't get it. And I'm not someone who was like, there's all these people like, he's the main reason. I'm like, well, I mean, he could have done more in certain aspects, but like, I mean, he kind of brought Notre Dame back from the dead. So like, let's not get too carried away with some of these.
I mean, we think that they're the next step away from being a playoff winning team,
and
right?
And he was the one who got them.
Right.
So you did all credit for him, right? Yeah.
It strikes me. Well, it just strikes me how like unnecessary it was. Who was pining for this? Who was looking for the Brian Kelly like reason why? Like I think everyone kind of understood, right?
Yeah.
So obviously this came from. I mean, he did two outlets. Right.
Yeah.
It's not like it was one guy that's his boy. Like he did two. He obviously wanted to talk about this. And it just like the quotes, like, do you like this? You like the lack of self-awareness, I think, is what's really striking to me is that you don't like, do you see how you're coming across here? You're just making excuses. I mean, it's like, and then Notre Dame, the social media team, they post some pictures with the caption, no excuses here. Right. And it's like such an easy dunk on him.
Yeah.
He just walks right into it. For what? Like there was no reason for it. My theory is
take the high road. Like, don't say any, like, just, there is no reason that he had said, he could have kept it short and sweet and just said like, listen, there are certain things I wanted, or the whole, we weren't aligned or whatever. Keep it at that. Right. No one needs to go. He didn't need to go and like, and then even some of the stuff like, man, 6 weeks, I'm like, I'm on the road or whatever, and here I just drive my Tesla to this thing. It's like, okay, like, first of all, you're dropping the Tesla. It just sounds so bad.
Like, why are you talking about
your Tesla?
And then like, I'm so cool now. Like he talks about like he's cool, like he's a cool guy.
And you're taking a private jet when you were coach of Notre Dame. Like, it's not like you weren't flying coach and staying at a Red Roof Inn, man. Like, like he's
a part of the South Bend Cubs taking the charter bus.
Or like, now I'm in the AL East Like,
That's not like
he just wasn't in the playoff. He was just in the friggin' college football playoff.
It's such a dated reference, too. The AL East has not won anything.
AL East. Like, I'm sorry. Like, but it just shows whatever. He's obviously from a different generation,
Right,
but like, and I saw somebody say like, wow, now we know Brian Kelly's real goal is to become the Baltimore Orioles. But it was just so unnecessary, is the perfect word for it, is unnecessary. It just looks bad. And it's just, I don't know. Like, I do think Brian Kelly is a really good coach. I think it is easier to get. I mean, look at what they've did with all these transfers and stuff like that. You couldn't do that at Notre Dame. You couldn't get half of the guys that they got in the portal. Like they wouldn't even be able to bring them to the table. Like, actually, probably 90% of the guys they got from the portal, they wouldn't be able to bring to the table at Notre Dame out of the guys that they just recently got. And there's definitely, like, you know, some kids that Notre Dame doesn't even bother recruiting to that wouldn't maybe be fits at Notre Dame. He's going to be able to get access to that kind of stuff. And if I don't know about how his whole staff is going to go, I don't really know enough about it, to be honest. But like, I imagine they're going to have top 10 recruiting classes, because it's just kind of set up.
They have always had.
Yeah. It's kind of set up there. Like, Les Miles was getting, like, I mean, it's people talk about it. Orgeron had this, like, I mean, there was OBJ and Jarvis Landry were receivers for Les Miles. I mean, they didn't win anything with those guys, but they had them, right? And like, he's gonna have like elite talent on that team. I mean, he's still got to beat Alabama, and he's still got to beat Georgia.
He has the same problems. The problems.
It's the same problems, whatever. So I mean, if you told me he won a national championship in 5 years, I would not be surprised. I would not. But if you told me that he also was out of a job in 5 years, I wouldn't be surprised either. Like, that's the volatility of that job. So, I mean, it is a pretty big gamble, because if it could really come back in his face. I don't know. And maybe he needed to get motivated. Maybe he just had been at Notre Dame too long, and he just was like, I need to get out.
And if that's what it is, then say that.
Yeah.
And just say it, right? Like, I found myself looking at other jobs and being intrigued.
Coach at Notre Dame longer than any other head coach,
like,
right? So I get it.
I found myself being intrigued by other positions, and it kept happening. It kept happening. It's not fair to me. It's not fair to the program. It's not fair to the players. Can't be half in and half out at the University of Notre Dame as the head coach. So I just felt like it was the best move for everybody. If you say that, no problem. But instead, it's just like you're taking.
He just
shots.
really played it in a bad. It's obviously he's pretty bitter. Like, it's
not just bitter, but like insecure as well. Like, this reeks of insecurity.
Yeah.
When you make the comment about Marcus Freeman, I had 19 years of head coaching, and I screwed up the first 2 years at Notre Dame. Like, he's gonna have a tough time. Why would you? What? That's not your concern. Like, that's not for you to comment on, right?
Yeah.
It's not your business anymore, and he made it not his business. So like, don't talk about Marcus Freeman like that. Like that, like, to me, that comment is just like, it just reeks of an insecurity that he has about what happened, and he has to get his story out. And it's like, no one wants to hear it, and then you tell your story, and it's just a bunch of like whining and complaining. It's not.
Well, it's just funny because the whole thing of him, I think one of the kind of narratives that he, you know, it's also funny that this is one of the first things that I thought about too, is that, you know, Pete Thamel was the guy who was always doing those BK Puff pieces or whatever. He's obviously in tight with the program at Notre Dame. He's done a number of them, right? But then I was like, oh, like Dodd and Russo, like never did any of those stories. I'm like, okay, so this is their getting in. This is his LSU things, and it's probably a relationship with like the SID and all that kind of stuff that goes along with her. Scott Woodward, the AD there, and all that probably plays into it. But you know, in those kind of like Thamel pieces, it was always like, this is a new Brian Kelly, the reboot, and all this stuff, and all the things, and they're still this is what they're doing to try to get back and win, and look how close they are. And it was a lot of that, right? A very positive stuff, right? Very positive stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the things that was kind of, that he tried to get through was that now he's comfortable at Notre Dame, and he wasn't comfortable at the beginning. And it's like, now he's just in a groove, and he's just like getting along with everyone and everything. He's just feeling better than ever. And then it was just pretty obvious that no, you were lying the whole time, and you actually have bad feelings about those early years and are still holding on to them. And maybe some of that came out because the fans obviously, like, I mean, he's just getting roasted, but not just Notre Dame fans, by everyone, when, the fake Southern accent and the dancing and all that kind of stuff. And he's like, literally, like, Brian Kelly's not making PTI when he was like going to the playoff, but he's making PTI when he's doing the bad grinding on a recruit, right? Like, right. Yeah. So he's probably, even if he says, that doesn't bother me, yeah, it probably bothered him a little bit, or else maybe he probably wouldn't be reacting like this.
Why is he doing this? There's no other reason.
I don't know. And I mean, I don't really know what else more to say. I guess we kind of said it already, but like, I just think that, I think it's pretty obvious. It was a good thing that he moved on. And
yeah. I mean, especially given just like the way, we know now, like how he felt about everything. It's like, oh, yeah, like that needed to end. So, yeah. All right.
Oh, the one last thing is that I'll say is that, the one stuff with like getting the improvements to the Goog or building a new facility and all that kind of stuff. And obviously that is something like Notre Dame, when the Goog was originally built, obviously that's why they built the new practice facility, because their indoor thing in the Goog was not good enough. Right. And so there's still pieces that they have to do there to make it better. And it's obvious, but one, I know they are going to do things for the Goog, but it's like some of the stuff like didn't get done because there's a freaking pandemic. Like, so a lot of people who give a lot of money to Notre Dame, weren't doing that well.
Yeah. No one was spending.
No one was like, I'm just, I still have plenty of millions to give. Like, that is not, and it's not an easy thing. It's one thing to say like, like there's circumstances that kind of led to it too, which I also thought was like, I mean, let it go. Just let it go, man. Like,
yeah, it's And if that was a reason why you left, like, come on. It's obviously not.
Yeah.
No. All right. Let's move on from Brian Kelly. We've talked enough about him. Hopefully he's done with his little exposés and that sort of thing. So let's move on to the original topic of the show, which is going to be the defensive stock report. And it kind of works out because there was an addition to the defensive line, and they're going to be the first group we talk about, Chris Smith from Harvard. So Jamie, why don't we go over the defensive line right now? Obviously, they lost Aiden Keanu-Ina. He tore his ACL. I think it was the first week of practice. Might have been the first practice of the spring. And
very early in spring.
Yeah. Tore his ACL. So he's out. They've replaced him with Chris Smith, a grad transfer from Harvard. He was originally committed to Minnesota. So at the very least, he's going to come in and provide depth. Hopefully he will, weighs 293 right now. Obviously everyone's looking for that magic 300 pounds, but you had a film review on him, and just reading it, you kind of likened him to Kurt Hinish, which obviously, if he has a similar game to that would be very good for Notre Dame, considering the success that Kurt Hinish had. So just talk about how he fits and how you see how does this change your outlook for the defensive line? Just kind of as we move on to the kind of end of the spring, the second half of the spring, and then into the summer.
It definitely changes the outlook. I already would have said it would have been stock up for me, even without him. So definitely, like it's like stocks even higher now. Like I think that because it still was a question mark, just depth wise. Also too, like I think if they all of a sudden got one more injury there, they could be in real trouble in terms of depth. But like, first I'll get into Smith, and then I'll get into kind of that position, I guess, in general. But like, Smith, yeah, like I said, Kurt Heinisch was the guy that, his game reminded me a lot of him. Like he's like, undersized in terms of like not the tallest, longest guy, but wins with like a good first step, good, quick, strong hands. He strikes people off the ball. Um, Probably moves better laterally, more like kind of pass rush potential than Heinisch. Is he kind of like the guy like Heinisch? I always thought was better in the biggest games. Like he was just had that kind of attitude where he was like not going to back down from anyone. Does Smith have that? I don't know. Right. That I can't tell. But just in terms of his just like regular traits, there's a lot of things that are similar to Heinisch and some things that are a little bit better. So I think at the very least, he's a guy that will play in the rotation and help them. So, and obviously he was committed to Minnesota before that too. And I'm certain he would have started at Minnesota. And, he's definitely, you think about a Harvard guy and he's a guy he could start at a Power 5 school. He's got that kind of ability. So right away, immediate improvement there. And then, so you already have Jacob Lacey at one technique, who is, obviously he's a bit undersized right now. He said he was like 275 right now. He said he's going to be like in the high 280s. That's what he wants to play at. And I think honestly, that's fine. That's fine.
Especially if you have someone behind you, right? Like you don't have to,
you're
not taking 50, 60 snaps of pounding.
Yeah. And also too, like, I think Lacey is, another guy too. Like he looked good in the open practice that I watched too. Obviously had played there before in his first 2 years at Notre Dame and was good behind Heinisch. Really kind of especially impressive as a true freshman too. So, I mean, you have those two guys there, and then you have Gabriel Rubio, who, admittedly last year, I think that was like a big question mark. I think he did look far away from being able to play when I saw him in the summer. And now I thought he looked like he took a huge step. And I know some of the players like, Cross and Lacey and a couple other guys were asked about him and they said, yeah, he had made a big step this year. So that's super encouraging because to me, he looks like a guy who can help Notre Dame this year. Whether or not how much he plays now, maybe he doesn't have to play as much. Right. But I think he's a guy who can play for Notre Dame this year. Certainly they've had way worse guys at their like third one tech or whatever. Right. So, and I think, his stock is rising. I think he's going to be a player for Notre Dame, where I thought he was going to be as a recruit. And then, you see him and you're like, oh, he's got a little bit further to go. But I think he went a long way and it's year one. So, and I think even Jason Onye was getting some reps at one tech too. And obviously he's a guy who's a big guy, 290-ish, whatever. Right. But only really played 1 year organized football, didn't have a senior year from Rhode Island. Physically has the kind of traits you're looking for. Definitely very raw, but like I questioned because I watched him. I'm like, this guy, I would question his motor when I watched him in high school. But I think some of that is probably like he didn't, he's still learning the game.
He's just learning the game, yeah. Like
yeah.
When he was, let me ask a question about Onye while we're talking about him. When he was recruited, I recall that it was like, I mean, maybe it was just my impression, right? That he was going to be more like Ade Ogundeji.
Yeah.
Right. Like that. And
I think that's where, but I think that was the one thing with Ade is that I was like, he's super raw and need to physically develop, but he also, I thought, showed a little bit more than Onye at the time. So I was like, or then Onye if on their same kind of path. So that's why I would have had questions about Onye. But
my question is then like, so Onye was projected as an end. And now
he's a defensive tackle for sure.
Right. So now he's taking one tech. So I guess
I think he was taking reps a little bit at both one tech and three tech.
So how do you project that? Because he's I'm going to call him a project when he was recruited.
Definitely. He's still a project.
So a project as an end. Now he's not playing in, right? Like that skill set is obviously different, right? So, how I guess is he taking to that I guess, in a way that projects like, okay, he can be a contributor for Notre Dame, within the rotation, that sort of thing. Because
I would think he has the potential to eventually be there. I think this year probably would have been a stretch if they had to play it but I mean, then again, I only watched the one practice with him. But I mean, in saying that, he made plays in the practice. He made plays. He had some bad plays too, but he made some plays. And off of just sheer, I'm a 290-pound big dude who plays with good effort.
Yeah.
And you can go a long way. And I was talking to Matt Freeman about him, and obviously this is a guy who didn't really play at Notre Dame, but he ended up starting at Minnesota. Micah Treadway, who was a very similar guy who came in as an end, but then he was moved into defensive tackle, pretty raw, and then he had some injuries that kind of held him back too. And he didn't end up playing at Notre Dame, really, but then ended up having 2 years of being a starter at Minnesota. And maybe that'll be what happens with Uyeyama, but I think Uyeyama, has a chance to play at Notre Dame. And before that's all I wanted to see out of him in the spring was this guy has a chance to play at Notre Dame. Because there's been some other defensive linemen that I've seen over the years, in recent years, that I've seen them right away, and I'm like, I don't think this guy's ever going to play. Yeah. Without naming names, I don't want to just throw guys under the bus, but there's definitely been some guys like that. And I wouldn't say that with Uyeyama. I think he's got some potential. So, I'm excited to kind of see his development. And I think kind of moving on to inside, 3 tech, you got, Smith also could play a little bit of 3 tech too. And Lacey can play a little bit of 3 tech. So that's good. Obviously Mills is a guy who moved to end, and I think he's going to be fine there, but he's going to rush inside on third downs. And he worked like that in the practice as well. And Howard Cross. So basically, but though Howard Cross was the starter in this, but Jason Adderall is out for the summer. But you would have never, if you just went to the practice as the first practice you saw of Notre Dame, you'd be like, oh, that guy must be returning starter. He must be the best defensive lineman on the team, because he was the best at that practice. He was awesome. He was really, really good. And I'd heard he had been really, really good before that. And and I think he's a perfect fit at 3 tech rather than a 1 tech, just his size and using his quickness. And I think him and Adam Nola, that is a really good 1-2 at 3 tech, where you basically have, you don't have the biggest guys. You don't have Jerry Tillery type guys, but you have 2 Sheldon Day types, and both guys, I think, with potential to be really disruptive. And obviously we saw quite a bit of that from Jason Adderall last year. And certainly in the tail end of the previous year too. And then Cross, playing 1 tech, and then he had where he basically had a bionic arm for half the year. But if he stays healthy, I think he's going to be really good. So interior wise, I think they're in a good spot. And the Tyson Ford was working in the interior, and you heard Al Washington kind of rave about his ability.
Very high. He seemed very high.
Very, very high on him. And he also, he looked like an early enrollee on some plays, and, got driven on a couple plays. That's tend to happen. Played a little bit too high pad level. Used to playing defensive end, sometimes standing up. All of a sudden now you're getting double team. It's a different story. But he also made plays. He made a couple plays and looked impressive. And that's all you want to see, the positive. And it sounds like he's got, a bright future. Maybe he's the guy who gets in, somehow sneaks into the rotation at the end of the year. So, I like what they have there inside. Do they have a true, kind of, monster who's going to eat up a ton of blocks and be a dominant run stuffer type guy? No, but they haven't really had that since Lewis Nix, really. And they've played pretty good run defense. So I think for the most part, they're going to be fine. And they're also, if you look at the schedule this year, you don't have any problems with that until you get to, a playoff situation, because none of the offensive lines, I don't think they're going to play an offensive line that's going to give them problems like that. And then at end, obviously you got Foskey back, and he looked great. And Justin Adderall looked great. You're really strong at Viper there. Didn't see a lot from Will Schweitzer. Kind of jury's still out there. I don't know if he's going to be a player or not. Right. Obviously, he's not a guy who's really talked about or asked about. And I think it's kind of important that he does well. So he'll be a guy that I'd be interested to watch in the spring game. And then at the other end, obviously, you got Mills, who looked good. He looked good. And then you had Nana and Ahrensberger. I mean, I don't want to say either of those guys stood out. And I still want to see more from that. And to me, that is the one kind of question there still. But we'll see what happens there. But I do think across the board, especially on third down, they're going to be really good rushing the passer this year. Yeah. It's going to be a strong D-line.
Yeah. I'm just going to put up this comment from Nick Davis. Howard Cross III is going to get it done this year. We agree, obviously, or at least Jamie agrees. He looks really good right now. Just wanted to highlight Nick and put that up. Thanks for coming on the show, making a comment. I'm heartened by everything you're saying, because you always want that second wave, right? And between, Howard Cross and Chris Smith and Justin Adamilola, like those three guys, right? You send them out with the second team, you feel like you're going to get really strong play, really strong play. I still have questions, and I think you guys still probably have questions too. And this is something that we're going to want to watch in the spring game. It's like, how does Riley Mills look? How does Nana look? How does Alex Ahrensberger look? Like to me, that's just kind of like the one question mark on defense, right? Like what is the level of, those three guys? You get really strong play out of the strong side defensive end. And I think Notre Dame's defense, the defensive line is going to look really good. All right, so we'll say stock up on that. Let's move over to the linebackers. You put out a lot of stuff about what the linebackers could be doing under the new defensive coordinator, Al Golden. And I was listening to a podcast this week talking about the different positions on defense and how pass rusher is kind of its own position, right? Not like defensive end or Viper or anything. It's like pass rusher. And when they were talking about it, I was thinking about Marist and how he is the type of guy where just knows how to create pressure in the passing game, right? He knows how to hit blitzes. He knows how to time it up.
There's something special about it. There's some guys have it. He's one of them. Yeah.
Right. So when thinking about him, I just thought, man, and it's just like, to me, it's so fortuitous that he's going to be coached by Al Golden now, because he came from the NFL, and like that's what the NFL is kind of doing all the time. I don't want to say sub packages, but like almost like a
hybrid players that use in different ways. Yeah.
Right. So
positionless football, it's like more of a thing now, specifically in the NFL, because there's so many different looks and so many different personnel packages you have to match up with. And if you can keep guys on the field and they can do different things, that's extremely valuable, right? It's extremely valuable.
Right. And when I think about that, like I think of a guy like Xavier Watts too. We'll get to him later, but just a guy like that who's like, when he's on the field, he makes things happen. How do we fit him in? So I think Marist, obviously we kind of have that. And so how does everyone else look? What did you think of specifically, the fit of Bo Bauer in the middle? Because, when he announced he was coming back, in my mind, it's one of those things where you kind of slot everybody, right? Like, okay, Marist is Will. And so what are we going to do with JD Bertrand, who led the team in tackles last year? And obviously, we're going to move him to Mike. Okay, we'll move him to Mike. Bo Bauer's coming back. It's going to be a backup Mike, right? And then you have Junior Tuli Halamaka. I don't really know sure how that fits, and then where does it fit with someone like Prince Kollie and that sort of thing? But it seems like, at least at this moment, Bo Bauer's, kind of with the ones as a Mike linebacker. Tell me how that looks, and tell me how just like the I don't know how that all seems to be coming together. It seems like Jack Kaiser is kind of cementing a role for himself at the rover position. So tell me how it all seemed to be fitting, when you saw the team.
Well, I think Bauer, and it's something we've talked about before, but at the very least, you knew what you're going to get. Like there's a
Right.
baseline there that you're going to get out of him. And I think he's running with the ones now, but Bertrand also didn't really practice
He's
full.
got a hurt wrist.
Yeah, he had a wrist injury at the
Wearing a
end of
cast.
yeah. So, is he going to be the starter at Mike this year? I don't know. We'll see. But I think he's definitely someone. I thought he looked good at the practice. I think some of the stuff with Bo Bauer before was maybe like lack of discipline, like not in a way like he's a dirty player or anything. I mean, like in terms of like being, sometimes you got to like slow flow and be patient with stuff, and he's just a go guy. That's just his. And I think that was part of the reason why I kind of think like Drew White was always like in front of him, because it was like you could count on Drew more, and he was like a little bit more instinctive than Bo, at least in my opinion. And I think with Bo, he definitely looked like under control, all that stuff. Obviously, he's going to play a role in third down and all that this year. He's done it very well last few years. Right. So, is he going to be the starter? I don't know. I think like that's like one question for me, and which is why like I would say I would put it at a hold for the linebackers overall, because I just don't know what's going to happen at that Mike position yet. Like, I don't know. Like, I think Bauer could probably be like definitely like an adequate starter. And Bertrand, there's a lot of stuff he did last year that I liked. And then I think that if he is a Mike linebacker and he's a 2-down guy and he's not put as an overhang player, and he makes tackles in the backfield, which he just missed and just like over pursued. So he's kind of have a little bit of that sometimes too, with a little bit just like breaking down in the backfield where he missed some plays. I think he could be a really good 2-down linebacker, right? Like I don't think he's a 3rd-down guy, but I think he's a good 2. And the one thing you can say about it as a blitzer, he has that like knows how to like get skinny and like get in there on the blitz. Like he was disruptive as a blitzer. He just didn't finish. And some guys are just bad at it, and so maybe he's not going to be good at it. But I think there's potential there. And I think, if you're going to look at it, you would say if they moved Jack Kaiser to Mike, and then all of a sudden, and I don't know if he can play there or not, whatever. I didn't see him work there and whatever, but he has the athleticism that all of a sudden your linebackers become more athletic when you do that. And he's certainly athletic enough to play Rover, and he did a solid job last year, right? And I thought he looked good out there too. But then it's like, I wonder what's the best combination of like the top 3 linebackers, or 3 or 4 or 5 or whoever, right? So how's that going to look? And I don't know that yet, so, and because I don't know that, I'm like a little bit, I don't know how good, like, I don't know about Jordan Botello at Rover, for example, who got a ton of reps as the number 2 Rover, and he's there now. I don't know enough about him yet. To me, he looked like, he had some bad plays and then he had a couple of good ones. So he's, even though it's year 3, but it's a new position. So it's like, I don't know, because you see that and you're like, I don't know if the next practice he can get it like all right in the next practice, because he's inexperienced, right? So I like the potential there. And Kollie too. I thought Kollie looked good, like way better, way more assertive than he was last year.
How was his build?
He's always been a guy who's he's not tall, right? Like
he just looked too thick last year. Like that was just my impression. It just didn't look. He didn't move the way. Like Jalen Sneed looks like I thought Kollie would look like.
Yeah, that's a good point. I thought, what? I thought he moved around great. So that's the one thing that like in terms of like how he moved in coverage and stuff, I thought he moved around great. And I think Sneed, Burnham, Junior Tui Halamaka, Nolan Zeter, all those guys like flashed. So it's like, I'm excited about those guys. And I don't know, like maybe one of those guys is going to be good enough to be in the 2 deep and like be a player for Notre Dame this year. Like if you told me to like, I just throwing it out there, if Junior Tui Halamaka was like the starter at Mike in like week 8 for Notre Dame, I don't think I'd be shocked by it because first of all, he looks like he's in year 3 of the program. Like he looks great, and he doesn't look out of place, and not just physically, but just in any way on the field. So if he's looking like that now in a few practices into spring, what is he going to look like a few months from now? Right. So I don't know. Right. So that's why I'm like, I'm not sure. Like, I'm not sure how much like Collie's going to play at will, because how much are you going to want to take like a guy like Maris off the field? Are you going to want to play like Maris a little bit at Rover too, because he can do some different things there too? Like, what are you going to do with all of these guys? Is Botello going to play? Like, is he going to be at a point where all of a sudden he's like taking a third of the reps at Rover? Like, I don't know. Like, I'm really not sure. I like the talent across the board and the athleticism there. I think Notre Dame is a faster linebacker group than they were last year.
Yeah.
So that's good. That's definitely good. But I just don't know who's going to be like the starting 3 right now and how that's going to work out. The only thing that I'm like pretty confident of is I think Marist is going to be very, very good in the player, and I'd be at the starting will.
Yeah.
And I mean, Kaiser's going to start. He's going to start.
Oh yeah.
Somewhere.
Definitely.
I just think he's probably going to be at Rover and probably be a good player. But I mean, and then even then, I'm like, probably good enough to play on third down more than that too. So it's like kind of like good problems. It's so that's the way I'd put it. Mostly like good problems. It's like figuring it all out.
Yeah. I want to put up this comment from Terrence Kreider, because what's up, guys? Prince Kollie has to see the field this year just on pure athleticism and speed. Needs to be coached up. The talent is there. So I agree with that. Thing is, you could say that about a few guys, right? So you could say that about Jordan Botelho. You could say that about like Junior Tuli Halamaka. Like, so we've been talking about who could we move to Mike, right? Like, we're talking about Kaiser. We've talked about Botelho. We've talked about Kollie, right? The thing is that Junior looking so good right now, in my opinion, prevents that, because that's his spot. And when I say his spot, I mean, you're not moving Junior anywhere else.
He's a Mike linebacker. There's no other.
So position. Why would they then, I'm saying we, like I'm speaking as a coach, but why would they then move a blocker, a field blocker to Junior? Like, to me, Junior next year is the guy. It just the way that he's playing right now, he's going to have a year. He's probably going to see the field in some capacity this year because he's just playing too well. He'll see the field in some capacity, and then Bauer moves on next year, and Junior takes the role, right? You recruited him for that, right? This is a top 150 player, right? It should not be surprising that someone like him with his pedigree moves in and takes the role.
I think the thing is too, is that I think he could, but it's like, if you said that like Josh Burnham was the starting Mike next year, or Kaiser was there too, like, that's what I mean. I think there's just, it's kind of like, it's good because I like Golden is going to be able to have to figure it out and stuff like that. Like, so maybe it's not the greatest right now, but I just really think like you might get into a situation next year where you say like, maybe Bertrand becomes a starter this year and he has a great year, right? He has a really good year in his role, right? And he's just in the right role, as Nick mentioned the thing, right? He was overextended and played too many reps, whatever, and some of these things. And that kind of showed his warts. And I think that's totally true. And I think there's some people who are like way too critical of him because of that. And I think in the right role, I think he could be a good player for Notre Dame, like a very good. And he was good in his own role, in certain parts of his role last year, right? I mean, you don't make 101 tackles. You don't like fall back into that. Like, that's, you have to be somewhat of a player.
Right.
And so, but I'm saying like he could do that and be very good this year and be like, wow, he's a really good Mike. But then one of those younger guys could be like, this guy's too good. We got to get him on the field. Like that could, and they jump him or jump another guy. Like that's just kind of where Notre Dame's at right now. Because if you look at like, there's 11 guys in the linebacker room, right? Well, 9 of them were like blue chip guys, and the other 2 are Jack Kaiser and Maris Liufau. And you would say like, obviously those guys were kind of like, for different reasons, they weren't ranked as high, small school for Kaiser, but definitely like a really, really good athlete and a really good player. And you could see how he would go under the radar. And then Marist obviously is like physical development and, played multiple positions and in Hawaii. So a little bit under the radar. Like, so just it's a very talented group. And then obviously the next year they're going to get like, Drake Bowen and like whatever, like Zinter or whatever, like they're going to be good again. So, they're really loaded. Like there's going to be good players who don't play like, and so maybe Kollie it's like saying Kollie has to, well, he's got to earn it. That's just how it is because there's just too many guys. So it's like, if he is so good, Notre Dame is in a position now where they at linebacker where they're like, you have to get this guy on the field because they need him to develop. And it's like, well, if Maris is that good, then it's like, maybe he doesn't need to get on the field. You know what I mean? Like he doesn't need to get on the field that much, like, cause you don't want to take Maris off the field. Right. Like, so there has to be a balance there. And you hope, I think any kind of coach, position coach, you want to be able to play, your ones and your twos at each position. Right. And feel confident because there's obviously injuries happen during the year and you won't always want to be able to be able to play those guys. And I think it's going to be a competitive situation to you. I think it's exciting.
And like, thing is, these are Alabama problems, right? Like they are, you get a whole bunch of studs and the best of the, you have 8 studs on the roster and the best 3 play and those that don't are just, you just don't. So that's the rich people problems that we're looking for. Right. All right. Moving on to corners. I'm going to just tell you right now, I'm a little worried. And here's part of the reason why I'm a little bit worried about this position is it's because of the receiver shortage that Notre Dame has right now. Is you're not getting the guys like not so much Ryan Barnes because he's getting a lot of good reps right now, but like guys like Philip Riley and Chance Tucker and
Jayden Mickey.
And Jayden Mickey, that's sort of, like there's not enough good receivers to go up against right now, and that it just thwarts their development.
It hurts their development. It's hard to get a true evaluation on them. It's just harder. They're getting less reps than they would against really good guys. Like it's just that really hinders them. And which is why in that practice, I was just like, we talked, offline about the corners and you're like, how do they look? I'm like, I don't know. Like because they didn't really test them that much, right? Like it's tough to say.
They have a tough time running one-on-ones.
And obviously Cam Hart is out right now too, right? Yeah. And obviously he's gonna play a ton. And so, and then you're like, so they had Clarence Lewis playing the field, and you have Brian Barnes is playing the boundary. So is Cam Hart going to be on the boundary now? And that's where Lewis is going to be in the field, or they're just doing that for now? Like, I don't know. Right. So that'll be kind of interesting to kind of see where they're at. But I really think like Lewis is better suited there. And if you can get Hart to be the boundary and he's going to play well there and he's like grows and is better than he was last year and all that kind of stuff, then I think, you are cooking with something there at corner. So it's just hard to evaluate all those guys. Like Ryan Barnes, like we said too, he looks just like he's first guy off the bus. Yeah. Hey, Ryan, don't bring your shirt when you're wearing your suit jacket. Cause the guy's like, you could see he's shredded. So it's like, like looks great. But I mean, I want to see him tested more. And it's hard to do when you're missing a bunch of receivers.
Yeah, like they can't run like you're just not getting the number of reps. Even if they're quality reps, you're not getting the numbers. Like you want to be running one-on-one, like one-on-ones and 7-on-7,
Yeah.
like in the spring. It's very, very important.
And you want to see like Kevin Austin against Kevin. That's why too, as much as I understand why Kevin Austin left too, but like if Kevin Austin would have come back, that changes the whole dynamic of like, okay, this is the boundary you're going to go against this guy
is who you're going against
because he's a legit guy. He's
every single day you're going against Kevin Austin.
Yeah. And we don't know enough about like Kollie, and obviously at that practice too, Kollie was out with
he had the red jersey.
Yeah, he had the red jersey, and then Wilkins got hurt, and now he's out for the next. So it's just really tough to evaluate. Like, how are you going to evaluate those boundary corners? And I tell you one thing too, you don't want to wait to have to evaluate and have to go against Marvin Harrison Jr.
Right, like you don't want
to get it. You want to have a good idea of where you stand. And I think that they're obviously going to have a much better idea of where they stand in ball camp than they do now. They should be healthier. Tobias Merriweather will be there. I mean, I would say I'd be surprised if they didn't add at least one more transfer. Because certainly like Chris Smith, like kind of happened like that.
Yeah.
So like, that's how it can happen. So, and you hope that that's the case, but it's just, I mean, I don't even think we can really talk about it more. Cause it's just I could say like, yeah, Jayden Mickey looked all right, but I don't know. I just don't know. Don't know.
And to Terrence, like he lives close to Bergen Catholic, seeing Bellamy play, nice price, like great, like honestly, but like who's he taking reps against? Like he's taking reps against walk-ons right now.
Yeah. Well,
he's
like he said, he's hurt right now. He had a hamstring thing, but that's true. So a lot of it is you're going to learn. And then even then it's like almost unfair to evaluate some of the guys. If you just say, oh, by the way, your first game is against probably the best wide receiver group
maybe
in
the best
country.
passing game in the nation.
Yeah. So say if someone plays in that game, they get torched. That doesn't mean they're bad,
right.
Like it just might mean they weren't ready yet, or they weren't able to prepare like they needed to. So I don't know. To me, it's probably going to be an enigma, and hopefully I hope we get quite a bit of access in August and get to see these guys more. And, but we'll see where they're at.
All right. We will wrap it up with the best position on the field when everyone wants to play is safety. Now, I feel the opposite about safeties. I feel great about them. I love hearing Brandon Josephs making plays on the ball. Ramon Henderson, there's obviously a lot of things about him being said. Xavier Watts making tackles. Matt got a great video of them doing the 3-on-3 drill. Xavier Watts coming up and popping Logan Diggs really well. When you have those three, and then you have DJ Brown and Houston Griffith, who we know can play in games and can be counted on to, do the right things. And you have Justin Walters back there, who's fighting for consideration, frankly. I feel like that's in like kind of like a really healthy position. So how do you see it right now?
Well, I think it says a lot too, because like when Chris O'Leary was asked about it, like Walters is kind of normally that'd be a guy that you'd say, oh man, they kind of need him to play
right
this year. And I mean, unless like because I don't know what's going to happen with Griffith and DJ Brown, and maybe if those guys aren't like for sure starters at the end of spring, that they'll look to play somewhere else. I don't know, right? That could be a possibility. So that's also something to remember, which would obviously hurt the depth there. But I mean, it's hard not to like what you have there. Like considering obviously you lose Kyle Hamilton, and it could have been like a really horrible situation, really bad. And you bring in Brandon Joseph, and that obviously softens the blow a lot. And then I think like guys like Henderson is ascending, and he's going to play a lot. Like Is he going to start? I think he's going to start, but if he doesn't start, I think he's going to play a lot. And there's a lot he's got a lot of room to get better. Right. And same with X Watts. Like, I am excited to see more of X Watts. And I didn't get to see a ton of him in that open practice, but like, I mean, he was definitely getting reps there. Like I said, it's hard to evaluate the safeties as well, too. Right. But I'm just athletically, I think with those guys kind of like with Watts and Joseph and Henderson kind of elevated, that the athleticism at the position overall, obviously you'd lose a freak athlete like Hamilton, that hurts, but the athleticism overall compared to kind of where they were going into the beginning of last year, I mean, it's an upgrade. So I mean, I'd say, and then I think even DJ Brown like looks motivated. Like he's trying to make a splash out there. So like, I think, and that's the kind of thing that you want. You want to see a guy like that respond, right? And certainly there was like, if you could say like a guy like Nick Coleman, who was in a similar kind of situation where he's kind of pushed out, but then really end up, making something of his senior year, despite being a backup.
Right. So
I think they're in a really good spot there, and you definitely stock up for me at safety. And I think it has a chance to be a really, really good group.
I have so much regret too, because it's like Kyle was a year too soon. If you had Henderson, Joseph, and Kyle Hamilton, you could put Hamilton at the rover spot, and then that could be your trio there, and then that's just like phenomenal group. But even so, like obviously that's not happening. But even without that, like I really like the idea of a top three of Henderson, Joseph, Watts. It's funny too. Like I'm just kind of assuming Watts is the third guy, and I don't know that for a fact at all. But I believe that's what's going to happen, because I believe he's that type of player. So, I like you. I really feel good about that group, and I like the idea of having multiple safeties like beyond just the two on the field. I think that adds a lot to the defense as a whole. And again, it just kind of what you were talking about we've been talking about with Al Golden, like knows how to do that, right? Knows how to fit in a player in a spot in like a hybrid role where it's like you can get the best out of that player and the thing that they do really well. Like Xavier Watts, right? Like great around the ball, finds the ball, knows how to make tackles, very aggressive, that sort of thing. So I guess just to wrap it up.
Wait, just one more thing, because I forgot to mention Tariq Bracy there, who got some reps at the field corner, but like in particular, like obviously he's the nickel, and he looked really good. Had a great practice that open practice. Certainly I think looks like he's going to be a valuable piece. And I think with some of the stuff that maybe the Bengals did in terms of like blitzing the corners and stuff, and I think he showed a pretty good knack for it a few times last year too. I'm excited about him there. So that's one area where you saw him make enough impact plays where you would say you feel good about that spot.
Perfect. All right. So how would you take just the defense as a whole? How would you kind of evaluate just so far? Like what would you wanted to see? How do you feel about them, kind of going forward as we get to this?
I feel great about the defensive line. I do feel good about the linebacker group. I think I don't know how it's going to shape out. I want to watch obviously the spring game and how guys look there. You obviously don't want to overreact to the spring game because it's a spring game, but you want to see more, and it's one of our only other chances to see it before the summer. So I want to see that. I'm excited about the potential there. Like I think the front seven, and we kind of didn't really get into it too, but I think there's a lot of good pass rushers in that linebacker group too. So, and that's only going to add to the best. So I think the pass rush is going to be good. That's going to help those corners out, whether, they're developing to the point where they should be or not. So I can't even say I'm cautiously optimistic about corner. I'm just like incomplete about the corner, but feel very good about the safety position. So if Notre Dame is in a plays better at corner this year, I think the defense, I wouldn't be surprised if they were like a top 10 defense this year.
Wow. Interesting.
And that's the other thing. They could also get lit up in that first week.
I really wish that this game was not the opener. No.
Well, it's just the kind of thing where you can even play pretty well and still give up 30, 35 to Ohio State. That's just the type of talent they have. So you could give up 35 and give up 6.5 yards per play. And you think oh man, that's a rough game. But if they're play great, get off the field on third down more than more than they're giving up. And if they're, getting to the quarterback, they create some turnovers.
I was going to say create some turnovers.
That's what they kind of got to do in that game. And I do think the defense is built to cause more havoc this year. So I'm overall stock up on the defense. I'm excited about it. I'm excited about what Al Golden is going to do too with the defense. So.
Well, that's fantastic, and you're more optimistic on the defense than I kind of expected you to be. So that's good. I like to hear that. Obviously new staff and everything, so that'll be good. All right, I think that'll do it for the show today. I think that was a good discussion, Jamie. I really enjoyed that. Yeah. So, what are we gonna do? What are we gonna do next week? I'm not sure.
Oh, sorry about that. I hit the wrong chord by accident. I don't know. I think, you know what? We'll see if there's news. Who knows? Maybe
you know what? Maybe Brian Kelly wants to talk to ESPN.
Maybe Brian Polian's gonna give an interview and he's gonna just start.
You know what? Where's the Mike Elston why I left expose? Where's that?
Elston, he probably gave. No one asked him those questions, but if he asked, he gave a couple of when he left, and he gave a couple this is the best place to be for whatever, and a couple of Notre Dame fans I saw were upset about it, but it's what is he supposed to say?
That's fine.
It's also his alma mater.
It's his alma mater. No problem.
Yeah, it's the best place supposed to be. He took a $300,000 pay cut. It's whatever, right?
The opposite of Kelly.
Yeah, but I just think that there's gonna be something will come up. Something will come up, and if not, we'll.
You know what? Hit us up on the.
Maybe you know what? Maybe next week we'll do all questions and we'll get people on here and we'll ask guys. We'll do a mailbag one.
All right. That sounds good to me. Yeah. We'll try to do a mailbag in the meantime, everybody lock into irishsportsdaily.com. Tons of content coming out all the time. Recruiting's heating up. They just put out we just put out an ISD Intel piece that if you're a subscriber, remember to the site, and you're going to see that there. There's a lot of good information there. Obviously, we got Power Hour. Mike and Jamie are going to be coming up with that over the weekend or on Monday after the weekend if anything comes up. So stay locked into irishsportsdaily.com. And everybody, thanks for joining us. If you're new here, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, get us more invisibility out there. And thanks for coming, and we'll talk to you all very soon.